So welcome to Simply Verified Beef, and the episode today is about practical auditing. And so we've got a return guest in Julie Anne Howe, who is in the first episode from season 1, which was simply the audit, which sort of went over some high-level things. And we've got Jim Whitley also joining us from Ontario as an auditor. So we're trying to get a few of the auditors in the same room to chat about some things related to the audit that you can take as real practical approaches as you either prepare for an audit or try to get your operation audit ready so that you are ready to roll whenever it may make good sense to become audited. So Julie Anne and Jim, I'll just throw the floor over to you. Jim, maybe you'd like to start and just a little bit of an introduction of who you are and where you're from.
Okay, thank you. Yep, my name's Jim Whitley. I'm 56. I'm a fourth generation farmer on the Niagara Escarpment. We're about an hour north of Toronto. Actually, we were just off the airport road, so we're an hour north of the Pearson Airport. We've got 46 Charolais, commercial cow-calf operation here. Because we're on the escarpment, there's a 400-foot drop from the top of the farm to the bottom, so we're kind of limited to other farming operations, so cow-calf is a good fit, and I love Charolais cattle, so that's a good fit too. Married to a wonderful wife, Myrna, for 29 years, and we have 4 kids, and they're all in their 20s. So that's a bit of a cross-section who I am.
Excellent. And Julie Anne?
Yeah, I'm Julie Anne Howe. I'm an auditor from southern Saskatchewan. I ranch just south of Moose Jaw, and I have purebred Charolais and Red Angus cattle. We run about 150 cow-calf pairs with a winter and a fall calving program. Additionally, we have a feed and seed business that we run and an apiary on the farm. So we are a multifaceted operation. But the purebred thing has been our game for generations. We're a 40-year member for Charolais Association this year, which is exciting. And we have a pure forage-based operation. We don't do any grain farming, but we are in an irrigation district, which is kind of unique to our operation. I am a professional agrologist and have a background in animal health and nutrition. And I really have been enjoying auditing here since 2017.
Okay, excellent. Well, Julie Anne, we'll get started with you. So why did you decide to get involved with Verified Beef Production Plus as an auditor?
I decided to become an auditor because there was actually a backlog in the province of Saskatchewan when I was coming on with our farm to get audited. In those late, teen years, there was a fair amount of backlash in the media in terms of Canadian beef not being sustainable. Then there was a large retail restaurant that had said that they couldn't source Canadian beef that was sustainable. And at that point, our farm triggered to say, we need to show that we are sustainable, and the VBP program is the accredited method to go through that. And as we were going through, there was a bit of a lag time when we were trying to get audited. And I had reached out to the provincial coordinator at the time to say, hey, if you are short auditors, it would be something that I'd be interested in doing as a contract type position that worked really well with our farming operation. So that's how I started, and I've been here since.
Very good. And Jim, how did you get roped up into all this?
Well, it's kind of a funny road. I was raised on the farm and thought I was going to farm, went off to University of Guelph and graduated, came home and realized I needed some money. The best paying job was Honda in Alliston, was 25 minutes away. So I went there for just a couple of years, was my plan to get my grub steak put together. And then I got married and had kids, and they wanted to eat every day. So I ended up staying. And after about 10 years, I took it a bit more serious down there. And just things happened. And I ended up being the manager, actually, of purchasing quality. And auditing was my thing. That was one of the things I did. And I enjoyed it immensely. Traveled all over the world doing audit for Honda, and then they have a kind of a 30 and out situation there. So I was done when I was 51. And then actually Myrna, my wife, thought we should do this VBP thing. So maybe similar to Julie Anne, got to understand a bit more about it through our own certification and thought, what the heck? So I applied, kind of sent an email out to say, is there an opportunity to be an auditor? And there was. So it was just a fantastic fit. I love auditing. I love going to automotive suppliers, and my passion for farming. I've always said I was a farmer first. Getting to go and see these other sites throughout Ontario has just been fantastic. So yeah, I guess that's why my two worlds came together in a really great way.
That's a little background that you've got to bring to this position auditing. So that's really good. So And I will remind the listeners that if you want to dig into more on what the audit is and some of that process of the audit, then you can head back to season 1, episode 1, Simply the Audit. But today, with the captive audience of these auditors that are in the room today, we're just going to try to go over best practices. So with an auditor lens on, as you folks do, assuming the listeners have already done the training, what are some of the things that you see on farm that are a really good process or best practice or something as it relates to getting prepared for that first audit if they've never done it before? Jim, I'll throw it out to you first, maybe.
Okay, thank you. I think getting ready is if the people use the VBP templates as a reference to assure you have comparable data collection tool. So you don't have to use the templates. I use the templates as I audit, because if they have a unique format or something, then I use it like a check sheet. So they could use the templates as a check sheet ahead of time, to make sure that all the columns are there and the items are being captured, even if it is in their unique way. The second thing I'd suggest is a quick walk around and just do a tidy up. And what I mean by a tidy up, I have done an audit where, there was some expired health products, just a month or so, but a quick check on the critical control points. Some of the documents we send out ahead of time give the producers an idea of what we're going to be looking at. So just do a quick walk around and a little tidy up. We are there to audit your process. We're not out trying to, define something specifically, but you could walk around and do a little bit of a tidy up. And the next thing, or the last thing I would say is, and it's most important, and that's be excited and be proud to be able to show off what you do in your business on a daily business. So don't be nervous. We are doing an audit, but we're also creating a report. So don't be afraid to show off something that you're doing, maybe an environmental thing that you've done or some handling equipment. So be excited and proud to host the audit.
Excellent. Those are all really great points of process. So Julie Anne, do you have anything to add or to expand on?
I think Jim really hit the bulk of the high points. Another thing I would mention is for when you have the audit or coming and beforehand, I always recommend that all the people that are doing some of the key critical control points have familiarized themselves with the must-dos. So that can either be going through the manuals online, or ideally, if you can have more than one staff person in larger operations, do the training, because the more the people understand what the requirements are, the higher likelihood that we have that we're going to be successful across the board. So I always recommend that the team goes through the audit requirements together, and communication is a really big component of that.
That's a really good point. And I will give a little shout out to the new Canadian Cattle Learning System. I think that's what it's called, that has on-demand VBP Plus training now, so that you don't have to necessarily, if you can't get out to one of the meetings that us as coordinators put on, you can do it on your own time. You can finish a module, go away, do your chores, come back to it. It's just something that you can chip away at or have your staff members chip away at. So it's a really good resource there too, to get a few more people exposed to some of those, like Julie Anne said, the critical control points. So as we go through that audit process, do you guys have some common, and Julie Anne, maybe we'll start with you. Are there some common corrective actions that you see that are sort of like, they're not big deals, but it's just these little things that tend to pop up on farms in terms of a common corrective action that is probably easily remedied, but should have been thought about ahead of time?
Yeah, absolutely. The most common corrective action points that we have center around the animal health records. So oftentimes we will have records that are somewhat incomplete. So there'll be a cow and a treatment, but there might not be a diagnosis, or there might not be a withdrawal trait. So complete records are our number one. And then with that is having the accompanying prescriptions when we're going extra label. And this is a point that a lot of producers get a little bit stuck in the weeds on. Extra label is when you're using a product for anything that is not on the side of the box or listed in the compendium app. So the one that often comes up is, say that if someone's treating for a navel ill that isn't on label, that one is often extra label. On the cow level, some people will use alternate products for pink eye, and then you would need a prescription, and making sure that the oilers and rubbers that are being used commonly here out in the prairies have the appropriate products. That would be the number one. And then oftentimes the second part of record keeping is in our shipping validation, where we have individuals that don't quite have all the requirements to make sure that our shipping validations are complete. So oftentimes they'll have a manifest saying that they ship cattle, but the records check to say that we're checking that there's no hazards or withdrawals on those cattle aren't complete. Those are two of the really high level ones that we see most often. And the third one that I round out that I see often is the herbicide documentation, that we have a requirement with verified beef that we need to have herbicide records checks for any products that we're using for feed. So that would be forages. But now that in Western Canada, where we've seen significant drought over years, we also use a lot of straw for feed. So the requirement is that we have the records of the herbicides that we use in those products to make sure that we're hitting those pre-harvest withdrawals. And oftentimes that's a gap that I see.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Or green chop or things to that effect we don't think about because their intention was to go as grain, but the reality of it may not have been.
Yeah, we had to pivot a lot in the last couple of years here. And then also more and more in our area that we're seeing residue grazing on stubble. That is also a concern, especially if we're using a stubble that has been desiccated, then it's a real concern.
So Jim, do you have anything to add to that list? Like, because you're in a just different geography.
In Ontario, I was going to say the same thing. The shipping records related to the health records, and primarily the audits I've been doing have been cow-calf. And the priority, or we start, looking at cull cows, and for spring calvers that are then preg checking in November, and then maybe doing an Ivomec or some kind of vaccination at the same time as they're preg checking. Those open cows, they're culls and they're ready to go. So, I find in that area, the group treatment record related to the shipping record, sometimes there's some information or recording gaps there. The farmers are quite adamant, and they can sometimes list off the cows that were open because they know them so well. And we don't have huge herds here, but I would agree in that same areas of the group treatment records related to shipping records. The other one is the herbicide. We have monthly meetings, and I've brought this up before because I've jokingly said that the Ontario farmers look at me like I've got 3 heads or they want to rip my head off when I start talking about this herbicide requirement, when the corn is planted May 15th, sprayed June 15th, and isn't going to be harvested till October. And the withdrawal date is so extended. And then fungicide on straw for bedding or possibly for feed. So I guess I'm repeating a little bit what Julie Anne said, but those are the same issues or CAR forms that we're seeing primarily in Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know. And I do know that you auditors get together on a semi-regular basis to chat about some of these commonalities. And then your auditor group brings some of those common things back to our coordinator group so that we can make maybe a little bit of an extra emphasis on things going forwards. It's a really good feedback loop, I suppose. And to remember that during all of this, it's not just nitpicking because there's a date that's missing. It's really trying to link in and prove to that greater food system that we're verifying that what you say you're doing is what you're doing, and to prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a quality control, but quality, it's related to consistency. It's related to everyone singing from the same song sheet. And just once we talk about it in the audit, it makes sense. I mean, we need to be able to show the public and in our story that we have control of the herbicides and pesticides related to feed. We understand the risk, and we are recording. We are aware that we have to protect our food chain and our animals. So the farmers at first are, what the heck? But then once we talk about it a little bit, it does make sense.
Yeah, right on. So switching gears a little bit, do you guys see any innovative things or ideas that you've seen on farm, and you guys as farmers and ranchers yourselves, have you ever seen anything that you've thought, wow, even if it's unrelated to the audit altogether, but I imagine that you guys see a lot of things when you are out on the road, on the audit trail. And have you seen anything that's been really innovative? And I mean, we don't have to, I mean, it's a good thing. So you can name names if you want to name names, but just any of those innovative ideas that you can bring to the broader audience. Julie Anne, do you have anything that you've seen out and about?
Sure. I wrote a list.
Oh, good.
So first off, with animal health records, I find the highest likelihood for success with animal health records is when the operation, no matter how small or how large, if they have an SOP book or a protocol book and or a decision tree on how and when to treat, they're most likely to have success in terms of managing their animal health treatments and knowing what to treat when and how in terms of prudence and success for them. And that even goes over through the vaccine and all the preventative animal health treatments that we do as well. So I find that that really makes a difference. And the decision tree I usually focus on is when people have a decision tree based on lameness, because oftentimes lameness, when I am out on ranches, it's not clearly defined. And I find when I do go to a place where they go, no, this cow, she's sore. I watched her. I gave her some pain meds. We looked for inflammation. And then I consulted with my SOP or my veterinarian, and we decided to treat because we felt that it might have been foot rot. That seems to be a high level of success there.
Yeah, very good. Jim, do you have anything? Because we've got a list from Julie Anne's.
I've just got a couple. The cattle handling. I was just recently up in Timmins actually, and they were a little bit remote, and just the gadgets that they had created themselves. They didn't have a tub in the one barn, but they jigged up a gate so that it had clicks on it and it acted like a tub. And I thought it was super unique. I thought it was pretty cool. But there's other examples of that, of cattle handling and things that innovative ideas that the farmers have created. The other one I wanted to mention is also related to health records. And there's a 700 cow, which is very large for Ontario, a 700 cow operation that I audited. And they had the foresight and the discipline. They designated one employee, it was the daughter-in-law, who was very much involved in the farm, but she did the data recording and everything. There was employees there and there were several people involved, and the cattle are in different places, but everything went to Amanda and she made sure it got recorded. And then when they shipped, nothing shipped without Amanda's approval. So it was a respected position in that operation, and Amanda was fed the information by phone. She was responsible for collecting it, but also she was the one who decided when things got shipped. And I really thought it was pretty unique in the discipline and the foresight to realize that they needed a data management person and to be able to collect it all. I think the beef farms are a little bit different sometimes than the dairy and some of the other operations that have this, because we are so spread. The cattle are in different places, especially big ones, and it is hard to capture all that information. So I thought that was a great process that they had at their place.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's the old adage that if everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. So where everybody's accountable, nobody's accountable. So that's really good best practice, especially if you've got multiple people with hands in the pie. Julie Anne, you got anything else?
Oh, I do. That was just animal health.
I knew you would.
But I agree that having a dedicated drug and shipping person is super. In terms of touching on welfare, one of the most innovative or interesting things I've seen at a couple of places in terms of animal health is that I've seen operations, from small operations up to 30,000 head feedlots, where they run the cattle through their handling systems to familiarize them with the space without doing any treatments or any modifications to the cattle, in terms of just having them feel the space and settle down. And by and large, everybody that has this practice, they feel that the cattle, once they feel settled, they work through that space so much more quickly and with less stress. So that's one thing that I really think is interesting and innovative, that they see that investing the time into familiarizing those cattle with the space pays off for them. And in addition to in the handling component, I appreciate the operations where they have a clear handling philosophy. We have so much diversity on the prairies here in terms of operations, so I don't want to be specific on what specific way they go, if they're a bud box person or if they're a ranch and rope and head and heel type person, but having the singular philosophy and then having the entire team on board on what the expectations and what the process are for that event or that handling method is really key for success that I see.
Do you guys find that there's anything that you would recommend because on processing days or branding days or some of these days that we're doing more volume, we probably tend to have some volunteers, people who are being voluntold, family members who might not be around all the time. Are there any best practices that you guys have seen for folks to really get those volunteers onboarded or familiar with this philosophy if you're sort of a quiet moving group or whatever the case may be? Any best practices you guys have seen there?
Sure, I can take that. I always recommend having a tailgate talk or a safety meeting beforehand. I'll reference my own operation. I have 3 children that help us out every time we move cattle. Their number one goal, we hit it on the head every time we start. Your job is to be safe. These are the spaces you can be in. These are the spaces you are not allowed to be in. And we go through the entire process of where the expectations are, where they can be, where they cannot be, and how to behave in the space before we start. And I think that's important that we can do at any level, and really assigning the task to the competencies. So with, say, large branding in the southwest of Saskatchewan here, we have our neighbors come in, and maybe the neighbor's cousin comes from town, and maybe they just carry the bucket for castration, or maybe they are at a gate or outside running water bottles, but we don't have them anywhere near calves that can kick them, or a syringe or anything like that where there's risk. So that's the number one recommendations that I would have.
Yeah, fantastic. Jim, you got anything to add?
Julie Anne hit the nail on the head, and that, having that shift start meeting, that day start meeting, and just making sure everybody understands what's going to happen. And again, about safety being priority, and then the right job for the right person.
Awesome. Any other of the best practices that you guys have seen, or innovative things or ideas on farm?
I'd like to talk about the grazing and the environmental aspect, actually. And I see some really neat operations, and I find on the environmental component side, especially when it comes to grazing management, the operations that have a written grazing plan or a Google map or a RM map where they have their paddocks and their plans written out, their pastures seem to be in the highest level of range health that I've seen. And I know that in the past few years, it has been extremely difficult in Saskatchewan to keep our pastures healthy and maintaining the range health that we'd like to have. But I do see the ones that have a grazing plan or have talked to someone that have put together a grazing plan for them, or in a holistic grazing group, they tend to have that component geared for success. And around here, or as a general comment, if we're taking care of our grass and our soil, then we're taking care of our cattle in terms of gains and health on pasture. So that is a real big clincher that I like to see. If someone has that, it tends to be a real positive kind of linchpin for the rest of the environmental stewardship component.
Great. So I will give a little plug there. There is currently in each province across Canada, is the On-Farm Climate Action Fund, also known as OFCAF, that if you find your provincial administrative delivery agent, which will be different in each province, but there is a significant amount of financial support that has been gone towards grazing and trying to get the rotational grazing in some of these pieces as it pertains to cover cropping and all of that sort of stuff. It's a really decent program that the provincial delivery agents have put up together, and with more help now than probably has been in the past for some of those things. And there's a grazing mentorship that the Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association has been sort of spearheading as well. That's in each corner of the country, so far as I can understand. So big shout out to those two things there. And I guess chipping away and moving on, we're going to do a future episode on data management, so we don't have to kind of dive into the weeds on there. But is there anything that you folks see from a record keeping perspective, any of the systems or documents? I know that Jim, you had alluded to the producer manual and the templates, but are there any best practices or things about that record keeping deal that you can expand on that we maybe haven't touched on yet?
From a data management, and I don't have as much experience as Julie Anne, but there's 3 types. There's pre-existing systems, and I won't plug anyone specifically. I don't think any of them align perfectly with, and Julie Anne could correct me if I'm wrong, that align perfectly with the VBP protocols, but they're very good and very supportive. Many of them are aligned or have a mandate related to scope, or a mandate related to production and output and profitability, but not specifically quality. And we would run into that when we went to automotive suppliers. They would show us a system. We'd say, okay, that's great. You know how many widgets you threw out from a cost point of view, but how many good ones did you make? And where's the quality data? And I find the same thing kind of exists with these pre-existing systems that you can buy. They are good. and they are very supportive, and they will do 80% of the job, but they don't really capture all the quality side of it, is my experience with it. Second thing are the self-made Excel data sheets or Google spreadsheets or whatever. And, I'm again going to cow-calf, so I'm seeing a lot of, again, production-related items. And, some people have taken them and expanded them to be able to capture the VBP protocols or data tracking that needs to be done. And that's wonderful to see. And then the last thing is the hard copies, fallback. And I'm going to say for 50 cows or less, if you printed off all the sheets from the VBP website, they are practical to be able to keep up. I can say that because I am a 50 cow guy and seems to be reasonable to keep up on hard copies. So the three types, the pre-existing, the self-made, and then the hard copies.
Yeah, right on. We will put the link to those templates in the show notes. So if you are looking for them, you can just go to the show notes and we will be able to plug those in. Julie Anne, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that Jim is absolutely correct in terms of the pre-existing data management systems. They all do a good job, but they don't quite all hit the requirements that VBP has in terms of critical control points, but they're a good start. Some of them are able to put in the add-ons depending on the program. So that's there. The Excel sheets, I'm at that level. We have a Google Sheets and it's actually quite handy. And then the written components. The big thing that I want to reiterate is the consistency. Pick your program, pick your person, and pick the consistent method that you will be able to manage the data in. So if that is, and I've seen the paper sheets used successfully up to 600-700 cows on the cow-calf side. And I've seen paper records work quite well in the feeder system up to a few thousand head. So, sometimes complexity of data management systems doesn't always translate into success. So the paper records are great. To be honest, when I come on farm and I see someone that has the binder with the manual and the paper records and the tabs all put together, it's usually a fairly good indicator that the record keeping is going to be quite thorough. So
you're going to have a good day when you see that binder with everything organized.
Yeah. Usually it shows. I'm like, oh, well, you have everything in one spot. And if you're using the sheets, you don't have to use the sheets. But if you do use the sheets, then you have all the required fields that you know that this is what I need to write down. And this is what I need to capture in order to hit the targets. So That's my plug for that.
Yeah, that's perfect. So we're just taking a lot of your time here so far, but we're just going to close on this question. So what is the best thing about your job as an auditor? And maybe if there is something that you least enjoy about that role, but what's the best thing about your job as an auditor? I'll start with Jim.
Okay, it's meeting the people and seeing the pride in their operations as they walk me around. I went and saw a young producer in February, and we went to the main barn and we saw his cow-calf herd, and it wasn't very big, and the calves, and I got a real sense of how he managed his cows. And he mentioned more than once about slipping over to the other farm to see the heifers. And, I thought, no, I'm pretty good from an audit point of view. And I got home and I said to Myrna, you know what? He wanted to show me those heifers. He mentioned it more than once. I should have just taken the 10 minutes and gone and see, and I regretted that. And I'm more aware of that now as an auditor, like just to see the pride in their operations. I guess the other one is to seeing a producer recognize a deficiency in their operation. And just as a result of asking a question, my recent example was on the human health side and first aids. Now they had the minimum, like there was one in the shop and there was ones around, but then he said, you know what, we don't have enough of those. And it wasn't a car form or anything. And he actually sent me a picture later to show me the first aid kit he put in the farm truck. And just by asking a question and having the conversation, they realized there was an opportunity to improve. The third thing, there's only 4, I won't go on and on, but the positive feedback from the producers at the end of an audit, like seeing a producer transition from being, maybe nervous and a bit defensive to being comfortable and having an open conversation as the audit went on. I had an audit up in Ottawa with a young couple, and at the end, it really stuck with me. But the wife said, yeah, who would have thought an audit could be fun, as I was leaving. And I really felt that was a success. They had a good experience. And the last thing is the networking with the other auditors. Julie Anne's been a great resource for me with her experience, Keith in Calgary, and I have lots of audit experience, but I don't have the same experience that Julie Anne has in the beef industry, even though we've maintained a herd, but with VBP and such. So the networking and the collaboration with the other auditors just been fantastic.
That's great. And Julie Anne?
No, thanks for that comment, Jim. Yeah, I've echoed Jim's comments. I love to go on farm. Generally, I learn something every time I go somewhere because there's such a large variety of management practices throughout the province of Saskatchewan here that it's neat that you go out, you see something different, you see some country, you learn about how other people manage their operations and just some of the things that you can tweak and say, I never thought of it that way. That's the kind of the golden nugget in the auditing system that I do. And honestly, I take pride in the fact that we have the program that we do, that we are developed by industry for industry, that I enjoy being able to deliver it. And I can stand proud saying that, yeah, I'm here, we're going to do an audit and we're going to show that we're doing the things that we do. Echoing Jim's comments, it is tricky sometimes. People are very nervous because the word audit scares some people. And depending on the motive, I will say, to go through the system in terms of accreditation, sometimes the level of preparedness will affect how the individual goes through the audit. The ones that are well prepared, after the first 5-10 minutes, we do the walk around the facility. They tell me about their cows and how they manage, and they're all proud, right? Because there is so much pride in the operations, and we settled through and we go through the audit, and people do find the audit valuable. The continuous improvement component is so key that people go, I never thought of this way. This is what I can do better, whether it be on the animal health side, the stewardship components, or the human component. That's kind of the shining component of the audit too, that we go through. It's not us versus them because we are working to critical control points. But even when there is a corrective action, we build a plan together to come into alignment for the competencies. So it's just, I think it's a great system, and I'm really proud to be part of the organization and do this job.
Well, excellent. And I would say too, that for anybody who is thinking about going through their first audit, listen to a few of these podcasts, the last one, this one. I mean, we talk about the word audit and how it has sort of negative connotations. I don't know if we're thinking we're all going to get a CRA tax audit or something like that, but it should be a positive, and you should take opportunity, because you've got Julie Anne or you've got Jim or you've got whichever other auditor does get assigned to show up at your place. That's an opportunity to talk to someone who does have this third party outside eye that might be able to see something that you don't see. So if you've been, I don't know, even if you've been struggling with something as simple as just a water bowl placement issue or something like that, they might have seen something at a different place to solve something. And I just always think that anytime you've got folks who are traveling farm to farm to farm on your farm or ranch, that's a really good opportunity to kind of pick their brain. Not that I want to give you guys any more work, but I think that it's a really good opportunity to have this like mini consultant there who is just there. You've got a captive audience and you're all working together to improve things. So I think that switching the mindset to view that auditor as being an opportunity and a resource. But in closing, I guess I will thank Julie Anne and Jim for joining me today. And I really appreciate the time. And if anybody's interested in learning more, you can go to www.verifiedbeef.ca, and the producer manuals are there. We'll have some things in the show notes as resources, and life will be good. So we will see you next month.
And with that, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to season 2 of the Simply Verified Beef podcast. And if you could please recommend us to a friend or neighbor, that would be spectacular. And we'd like to give an extra shout out to our season 2 sponsor, the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, in collaboration with New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. And we'd just like to thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next month.